Hi, and good evening, everyone. My name is Albert, and this is Vlogs About Nothing. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your very busy Monday evening to join me. I really appreciate it. We're now, like literally going into, I guess, what would be the second year of this show. And so I have never seen up until this point, so much love from you guys. I mean, seriously, thank you very much. If you're new to the channel, I really, welcome you with like all of whatever I can't welcome you with, because it's a running kind of joke here in the whole scheme of things, seeing as though like now I'm a character and I actually live a life that is very representative of the kind of character that I am here on camera. But it really doesn't matter, because both versions of me still absolutely are in favor of reaching for that very low bar and, trying not to care about the things that kind of make people a little type of way, you feel me? And just be a little bit more like receptive to more people than not. Now, again, I understand that there are some Richards in the world, you feel me? And I understand that there are some things that should not be tolerated. And in fact, tonight, I want to talk about dissent. In and of itself, I want to really kind of like really see if dissent is treasonous, if dissent is appropriate, when it may or may not be appropriate, and the kinds of ways that it really does impact, all of us on the daily. And so, most notably, I think that this improv is inspired by some recent news, link in the description below. And that most recent news is that the Supreme Court finally did their job. I mean, they typically, every 20 years or so, will actually do something that's good for the American populace as a whole. And moreover, I mean, we can't really help other people until we help ourselves, kind of a thing. So unfortunately, Americans, I feel like, would do a whole lot more for the world if they weren't so encumbered by the very idea that the judicial system set forth and put in place by the Constitution and enforced by, guys that have limitless atomic weapons and stuff. I'm just saying that, like, all of that together, brings about, like, the world that we live in and the very kind of rules that we oblige to and the kinds of freedoms that we sacrifice every single day in the name of, national security and stuff. Shout out to the CIA. I'm just saying, right? It's just, that's the way that it is. And it always has been like that. It will always be like that. So that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is the most recent Supreme Court decision that, not only prevented Donald Trump from executing some like 200-year-old war time clause in the Constitution or something, like the wartime treaty of 1787 or something. Fact check this stuff. I can't remember everything, but more or less what I'm telling you is true. I may not, have said the name of it right or anything, or the year or whatever, but just off the top of my mind, that's what I can remember. So, that being said, that's actually the article of the Constitution that this current president is using to, like, send people home without cause, kind of like picking you up on the side of the street, random dudes dressed in Levi blue jeans and wearing face masks and picking people up literally in the middle of the day, in the middle of city streets, at school, at work. Yeah, that can be similar and likened to fascism. So, I don't want to get things twisted. And, again, everyone's welcome here. You feel me? You vote for Trump? That's all right. I'm not sure if, in my opinion, you did the right thing. But, hey, we all make mistakes. Just hopefully we can all make it out so, like, at least in the same kind of place that we were before this sort of happened. Can you imagine in 2 years we will be debating whether or not the same president has the right to amend the Constitution for presidential term limits. Again, something that now, if we start talking about, won't be an issue in 2 years, because I can already see it becoming an issue. And again, that is some bad news, right? So hopefully, we're all on the same page here, but let's continue to talk, or let's begin to talk about dissent. Because even though the Supreme Court went ahead and decided to actually uphold the Constitution and legally prevent a sitting president from wartime crimes, it's like the judges are sort of acting as if, they're kind of lawyers in a sense. Is that a dumb question? Are all the Supreme Court justice judges lawyers? And if so, do they take the bar every year? Because I need to see, the bar exam scores. That's all that I'm saying. Because, I do believe lawyers have to renew their license every once in a while, right? So that's an interesting thing. I mean, when you get to that level, do you kind of just have no checks or balances? But let's continue to talk about dissent. So I don't want to get too far off the, too many sidebars here. Lately, we've been pretty good at staying on topic. So let's continue to do that. Dissent came from two judges. So ironically here, and this is when we begin the discussion of dissent. So even in the modern world, just a few days ago, Saturday, 1 o'clock in the morning, this is like real-time stuff, coming from good old Big Brother headquarters down in Virginia. I mean, Washington, D.C., somewhere near the Arlington area. Anyways, so news comes from this place, right? And the news is just that. The only two sitting Supreme Court justice judges that dissented from the overall, I don't know what they call it in law, I can't remember right now, but, whatever was done by the Supreme Court justice judges to prevent Donald Trump from executing that age-time-old war treaty and sending people back without any cause or anything at all like that. Clarence Thomas and the other guy, the other, Brett Kavanaugh, is that Brett? I mean, I'm sure. It's amazing. This is an impromptu speech. These guys must be so bad that, they, kind of just sit in my mind. It's like, oh, that guy did that. It doesn't sound anything away from what that person has been known, will continue to do, and will forever, be there to block actual progress. So anyways, dissent came from two Supreme Court justice judges. And that's unfortunate because the ruling should have been unanimous, right? The upholding of the Constitution is literally their only job. So, I mean, you can't make it any more complicated than what the reality of the situation is, right? And so, that's kind of weird. So this is an example of dissent that is utilized by the government against the people of the government. Can we understand that in very simple terms? This is exactly how dissent can be harmful. And in fact, one might argue, be treasonous. Now, isn't that ironic? And again, with all due respect, simple and quick disclaimer, I'm a nobody. Don't listen to me. These are in fact just my opinions. I mean nothing harmful. I'm not a harmful guy. I'm not a violent guy. I'm a very peaceful capital socialist, or social capitalist, right? More of a socialist. But again, I'm looking to seek some kind of, resolution as to the ongoing problems that we have. And again, I might argue, in my opinion, that the very idea of the government going against the people of the government is in and of itself an act of treason. Because, again, these guys are supposed to be upholding the Constitution. And when they do things, even if, quote, interpretation, close quote, is something that is good in some instances, right? The eradication of slavery, giving people rights, all of these very different things that the Constitution ultimately needed to be amended and changed and so forth. But moving forward, progress must be about, beneficial exchanges and mutually, reciprocally. Everyone should benefit from the kinds of things that the government and ultimately the Supreme Court justice judges decide to enforce. So notable examples of things they have dissented from are such things as Roe v. Wade, right? Ultimately, the Supreme Court justice judges have dissented from a prior law that was issued by the very same people who dissented from their decision, right? And so now abortion is not protected by the federal government. And so we've all seen how that's worked out, right? I mean, again, it's not worked out. In case you didn't know that, it hasn't worked out. It won't work out. And anytime we try to restrict anybody's rights, with their body, we're like, bad things are going to happen. Nothing good can come from making, or the lack of enforcement as it concerns the freedom of what we choose to do with or without our bodies. Moreover, in this particular instance, women, right? And I'm not a science guy. If some dude out there can get pregnant or whatever, you want to identify as a he, she, it, they, them, it doesn't matter. I'm just saying that, like, all people should be treated equal, and that the Supreme Court judges are in fact engaging in some like shady stuff, right? So another notable decision that has been issued by the Supreme Court in the last 15 years has been the removal of donor and campaign finance limits for political campaigns. So it used to be that you'd have to disclose where money came from and who was supporting who and so forth. Now there's things called political action committees. Moreover, there's things called SPACs, which are super political action committees. And these guys are literally laundering money and engaging in extortion in all different kinds of ways just to get that money to the people to elect the guy to be president. I mean, just recently, Elon Musk got a seat in the White House for $250 million. I mean, this is not a debate. This is what's actually happened. And so now that we've kind of talked, and we've taken a little bit more time than I would have liked, actually, and kind of like, some of the sidebars and stuff, and me forgetting what I'm talking about, I can't tell you how frustrating it is to try and give a succinct improv and just like sort of mumble and stutter your way through it. I notice these things, and I'm terribly sorry, but I can just continue to try. But do you see what I'm saying? I catch myself when I do it, and it's annoying, and so let's continue to talk about dissent. When is dissent, a good thing? Is dissent ever a good thing? Well, obviously not in any of the things that we've talked about in the last few minutes, right? It's obviously dissent from the very people who are supposed to protect us. That's undoubtedly not a good kind of dissent. Now, how about the idea of not listening to the federal government when they tell you that you gotta do certain things? Harvard University, right? The only institution in this country that has publicly just straight up said no. And again, like, that's the thing with state sovereignty and the recognition of state sovereignty and so forth, is just that very idea, is just that, like, you can say no, and it's not in and of itself the wrong thing to do. It's not wrong to stand up against what is more evil than anything that we've seen in our lifetimes. Shout out to all my millennials. I'm just saying, and we've gone through some stuff, right? I mean, 9/11, the 2008 stock market debacle over predatory underwritten loans that were packed into bundles and sold to the highest buyer. I mean, all subprime mortgage rates, right? Again, I'm not that stupid. I just don't want to get into the specifics of these things, because then we'll be talking about them all day, right? Kind of like the same guy who could have said no to the automobile manufacturers that were asking for a bailout, or the banks, right? The guy could have said no. Thank you, President Barack Obama, for, quite literally continuing the Ponzi scheme that ultimately the government could have just said no, right? So that is another bad example of dissent, right? Because the government should have just simply dissent. They should have practiced this, and they should have just said, I'm sorry. This is a free market, right? You make decisions, you take chances. If you lose, you lose. I thought that's what capitalism was about, but I guess that it's not. Dissent is not a bad thing, guys, alright? Ultimately, I want to kind of try to wrap this video up, because I'm understanding now that as I talk about it, it can be a lengthy thing to talk about, but just always be peaceful, always not be violent, always never be against the government. And that's what I'm saying. To dissent does not mean as an individual, as a constituent, as a United States citizen. That doesn't mean treason. Dissent from a government that stands in the way of democracy and stands in the way of enforcing the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, that's not dissent. That's called being American. And I can assure you, my friends, that anyone that is in this country and that is, like literally within the physical borders of this country, to all those people out there, who want to be a part of this country, it's up to us to stand up against the government when we need to stand up against the government. That's literally how the government is supposed to be. It's supposed to be challenged. We should never advocate to overthrow the government. We should never advocate to harm the government. But when the government, continues to do more harm to our communities than not, we can stand together in solidarity in peaceful ways and simply say no. We can say no to fascism. We can say no to authoritarian governments that literally work in the interest of so few people. Even if you think that this political regime is like about you, they're not. And I can assure you they never will be. Unless you're a billionaire, unless you're an owner of a major company. Again, it's just a bunch of businessmen who, are essentially turning our government into like a fraternity, right? And again, our government shouldn't be a fraternity. It's an organization that should be willing and able to accept all of the challenges that are brought forth to now what I believe is the second longest running and enforced constitution in the whole world. This country has a lot going for it, and I love being American, but I can't tell you enough that being American means standing up for what is right, no matter the cost. Again, what are they going to do to peaceful people? They're going to lock us up, they're going to throw us in jail. I mean, again, this is at the very core what peaceful protest and how, these kinds of demonstrations can actually work. And I really feel like we need to head in that direction. We all really need to consider the fact that this government is not working in our best interests. And so what can we do to redress our grievances? The very government that is threatening to strip away civil rights and to continue to deport people and to take away civil liberties and defund the very programs that support the people that need it the most. Okay, this isn't a country made up of millionaires and billionaires. The good majority of us are absolutely dirt class working poor. And so I'm just saying that when we live in a country where the most recent election, the statistics are in, 70 plus million people voted for the woman who lost, 70 million people plus voted for the man who won, and close to 90 million people that could have voted didn't vote. So, again, I'm not a math guy, but if all the people who didn't vote had somebody else to vote for, the two people who lost that got all the votes they did would not be in office. Is that kind of a simple way to understand really what's at the core of my argument here? Americans are not currently represented. The people that are representing us are so far from American, it is treasonous. And, things like the insurrection on January 6th that I have publicly condemned. And again, this is coming from somebody who was a registered Republican, who has in his life identified as a conservative, somebody who, again, did not really have a problem with Donald J. Trump until he did the very act that goes against all of what this very country stands for. And that is to put people like him in places that they deserve. And that's jail. That's not a weird place. That's not a threat. That's not anything at all like that. But when you're a criminal, that's typically where you go. And when you commit treason against the greatest government that we know of in modern history, that's a problem for me. That's a problem for every American out there. That's a problem for all of our service members who have risked their lives and continue to risk their lives, all in the name of what they believe to be democracy. They don't get paid enough. They don't have the kinds of benefits. They don't have the kinds of support from the very commander-in-chief who is weaponizing rhetoric in ways throughout the globe that have never before seen. At least not since people have had computers and half of a brain to really collectively push back against an agenda that is so clearly not about any of us. I hope that you guys have a really good night. I think I'm going to get out of character now, so give me a second. Okay, hey, I really appreciate you guys watching this channel. I seriously do. I opened up the video. There's more engagement with this channel than there's ever been. The subscriber count is awesome, and the views are just through the roof. I really do appreciate everyone giving me the opportunity to be a part of their life in some small way. It means a lot to me, and I know that it's nothing. Like, in the big scheme of things, this is nothing. I'm just a guy just trying to live his life, but at the same time, you know, like, trying to talk about things that I guess make other people feel uncomfortable, or what I'm really convinced of is that a lot of people have a lot to lose, you know, like jobs and families. Like, again, like it or not, you know, I've lost it all. So, I mean, you know, literally, I wake up sometimes and I'm like, you know, I'm happy to be alive. I'm so grateful. Life is an awesome experience. But I have nothing. You know, like, I mean, and then what I do have makes up for everything. It really does. I have an awesome roommate. I like, you know, again, I'm a freaking lucky guy. And I have never said that I wasn't, and I have never been ungrateful for the opportunities that have been presented to me in life. I've always totally jacked them up, you know, either on purpose or just kind of while trying to do the right thing. And ultimately, kind of doing the right thing is sometimes a lot more difficult than you'd like to imagine, right? And so going back to that, I feel like this is a channel that I hope people watch because for whatever reason they're unable to voice their concerns as a result of fearing for some kind of loss professionally that would then impact their lifestyle, their very way of living, and so forth. And so, you know, hopefully in some small way that's the case. Again, I'm a shameless guy who's lost all of the aforementioned things and has, you know, breath in their body and a half-working brain in their skull and a relentless need to smile and try to remain positive in a world that sometimes straight sucks, like, by every standard and every measure, you know. Like, again, real awesome experience for some people out there, you know. They're living their lives. They're you know, raising kids. They're having families. Things may be a little more expensive, but they're always going to get by. And I don't hate on those people. You feel me? I want everybody to experience that, and I want them to experience it sooner than later because life is so short. And the thing that sucks about being poor or being working class poor is you just never really get the time to appreciate little things like walks with your dog or the birds chirping. And again, I mean this is not my character. I'm absolutely speaking from just a place in me that really life is good. It can be good. And it's so bad for so many people that it's only fair that those of us with a voice do something about, like, we say something about what's going on. Otherwise, it, you know, like, damn, just a really sad story. One of those stories that you watch on a streaming service that, like, you're kind of into for a while, and then it just gets so sad that you're like, all right, I don't want to know what happens at the end. It's pretty clear it doesn't end well, so I'm gonna turn it off. um I hope that the world is going to do better in the future. I'm sure that it will. And little by little, we can get small successes and ultimately be socialist and have all the cool things that we all deserve, and be acceptable to one another, and continue to practice things like the separation of church and state instead of kind of blending the two together, which will never work for anyone in any capacity in any place on the surface of this planet. So at least not between human sentient Homo sapiens. My name is Albert. This is Vlogs About Nothing. Thank you very much for everything, and I really hope that you guys have a good night. I will see you tomorrow. All right? Bye.